that was a signal for me that I had some kind of radar. I could detect talent and I could believe in them super early. And those are all the ingredients for true early stage venture capitalists. It's not in the spreadsheet. Anyone that tells you that they're investing at the pre-seed round, when those guys invested in Steve Jobs, you think they had a spreadsheet in front of them? Like
the model that was ready to go.
Before the company was incorporated. It's obviously being aware of the business model, the metrics and the market, the product. There is something that's hard to define, which is, and you have to have that gut. And it's very hard to teach that. No matter how many people are like, come pay for my seminar, I'm going to teach you how to become a great early stage investor. It's bull. You either have the radar or you don't.
Welcome to the Early Podcast, where I interview the builders behind the world's most iconic companies. I'm Max Crowley. I was Uber's 25th employee and spent years scaling one of this generation's wildest rides. Each week, I sit down with the early innovators who really made it all happen. So please, tune in, like the show, subscribe, tell your friends, keep coming back. Let's go. Shervin Pishevar, the man. Good to see you. Thanks for joining the pod.
Hey, Max. Thank you. It's great to be here.
I really appreciate it. All right. So for you, I wanted to start at the beginning of your life. So you were born in Iran.
Yeah.
What age were you when you guys came to the United States? And what impact do you think that has had on your life and career?
Coming to America was completely transformative for me and my family. Very, very grateful for America. I don't think we would be alive if we had stayed in Iran. My dad was on the execution list by Ayatollah Khomeini. He helped save a lot of lives when he was there. He worked for the Shah, head of radio and television, and he had to escape. So I was like 4 years old when the revolution started. So 1979, 4, just becoming 5. My dad was head of radio and television for most of the country. As we're speaking, Iran is going through a historic, transformative moment. You know, we've been waiting 46 years for hopefully some chance of freedom and recapturing potential of what Iran used to be and what it could be. So, and my dad worked in the television building that was just bombed. So he called me, and my brother grew up in that building. I didn't even realize that. I mean, I'd been in it, but I was too young to remember. But yeah, they took that out. But it was that's where he worked, and that's where he put the foreign language broadcasts for foreigners to know how to get out of the country. So he helped the embassies back in 1979. There's State Department memos that are declassified where he was giving his thoughts and help to the embassies. And then he put the foreign language broadcast instructions how to get out of the country during the revolution. He helped a lot of people escape. And then Khomeini, Ayatollah then, who started the revolution, put my dad on the execution list. So, you know, he went into hiding. I didn't see my dad for 10 months.
Wow.
He was in hiding. And then basically one morning, I heard my brother, who was 6 years older, crying. And I woke up at like 4 a.m. and my dad was at the door. He was there to say goodbye because he was making his escape that day from the country to try to come to America. And, you know, a great story of Kismet, like the person helping him escape was from his hometown and he was from a poor family and asked my dad for a job in radio television. My dad gave him a job. Someone fired the guy. My dad reinstated him and was like, this is my guy. He's untouchable. Don't fire him. That guy remembered this and came to our house when my dad was in hiding and knocked on the door. And my mom was like, you know, didn't know who he was. So she was like, I don't know where he is. And then she checked with my dad and my dad was like, no, he's trustworthy. So she called the guy and the guy ended up, because he was from some family, religious family, and had a connection to like get a job as head of security for the airport. So he had the chance to walk
Sneak
my dad, through the airport. It was basically Argo. You know, it's like, so my dad met him at the airport that morning, and the guy walked him through security, took him to the Air France flight to get out. And then at the last second on the plane, it was like a movie. The soldiers came on the plane, and my dad thought it's over. He's going to be killed. They grabbed somebody 2 seats behind him, and the plane took off. And my dad was like saying he was crying because he didn't know if he was going to see his kids and his wife anymore. He got out, didn't see him for 2 years. Then the Iran-Iraq war started. So there was bombs falling in Tehran when I was a kid. Every night, bomb sirens going off, anti-aircraft shooting. And I kind of turned it into a game. So I had toy soldiers and tanks. And I realized later, like all my drawings as a kid were of war, bombs, missiles. And I was so angry that I, wasn't able to see my dad and all these things that happened, that I was super into remote control planes. So I was fantasizing about using remote control planes to kill Ayatollah Khomeini as a kid. I didn't know I was like inventing drone warfare when I was in the future. Yeah.
Incredible. And then, of course, I know your dad, who has a master's degree.
Yeah.
He gets to the United States and he's driving a cab.
Yeah.
And then you end up being one of the first investors in Uber. There's some irony in there.
Yeah. There's a full circle. Yeah. I grew up in Washington, D.C., the orange and black cabs. And my parents were both like professionals, intellectuals, highly educated, but when you came to America in the middle of the hostage crisis, it was hard to get a job as an Iranian. And so my mom was an educator for 14 years, teacher, but she had to get any job she could to put food on the table because we came to America with nothing. So she was a maid. So I'd go clean rooms with her. My dad drove the taxi. So I grew up in that taxi. And, when I met Travis years later, I told that story and he loved that. And I also understood implicitly like the taxi market in a way that maybe some other people didn't.
And the role of the driver and
the role of the driver. Yeah, exactly. How important they are in the equation. And then while he was driving a taxi, he was getting a PhD at Howard University. So full circle again, when, I made it, had some material success and Uber was going public. I went to Howard University and I gave them millions of dollars of Uber stock to endow a professorship in my dad's name. I took my dad to the campus and we did a whole event and made a little statue for him and bust. And then now we're setting up like startup programs there and bringing a bunch of our friends to come speak at Howard and help the students start their own companies. And now my nephew, who's a half black and he calls himself Blursian because he's Persian and black. He just got into Howard and he's very excited to go there. So we're excited about that legacy. And then I called my friends at Sequoia and I was like, hey, you guys have to stop helping Harvard. You got to start helping Howard. And I got Howard University's endowment which is like a 10X fund, is generationally locked out. Can't get in it. And they made room for Howard. And it's been a great thing for the university. Plus the Uber stock has like gone up. So it's worth like over 10 million. So it was cool. It was cool to do that.
Win across the board.
Yeah.
Well, and I've always looked up to in a number of ways, but especially how you've always taken care of your family and small way. I've tried to do a lot of that. So I think
you're very close to your parents. Yes. It's wonderful.
But one of the many lessons I've learned from you. All right. So you are an immigrant kid, everything we just talked about. Then there's you get a job at Menlo and you invest in Uber. Mm-hmm. What was the moment in between there when you made it? Because you never had like a silver spoon. No one gave you this life. And you don't just become a VC at Menlo. You don't have Sheryl Sandberg as a mentor. You don't get the introduction to Travis if you're just a nobody. What was the moment for you where things clicked, where it really changed for you?
I think it goes back to, I have to really give credit to my mom, passed away December 11th, 2024. I miss her really badly. She's the one that really taught me to dream in color. She was entrepreneurial. She was taking computer programming classes in the 80s when there was like the punch hole cards.
Yeah. Original programming.
Yeah. So she took me to those classes. So I fell in love with computers super early and I begged for a Apple IIc when that came out with the green monitor. And my mom and dad worked extra shifts to be able to buy me an Apple IIc. And that changed my life. I wrote my first code on there and got into a magnet school That was an amazing magnet school. They had communications program, they had a math and science program. We were like 100 kids, all it was guinea pigs. But that class ended up like creating hundreds of billions of dollars of companies, just that of those 100 kids. And that was in Silver Spring, Maryland. I went to Montgomery Blair and Eastern Intermediate, got bus there from Gaithersburg. So it was like an hour and a half bus ride each way.
Oh my.
So I had to get up at like 5 a.m.
You could tell you were a kid.
7th grade on.
Yeah. You were really I had to go 90 minutes to school.
Yeah. That was my version of like, I had to walk, to 100 miles to school. But it changed my life. And they bused us to Montgomery Blair, which was like the UN of schools. It was 200 countries represented, 2,000 something kids in the school, 80% African American. So I just, it changed my life. It was a highly diverse, amazing environment. And it taught me a lot. It taught me how to get along with everybody, changed my worldview. But yeah, that was, it goes back to that is my mom making me fall in love with entrepreneurship and computers, making me believe in myself, which then led to kind of going from, nothing to going to Berkeley, thinking that I could start a company. College, I started a company called WebOS, and it was the dawn of the internet. It was, the browser came out while I was at Berkeley. I was doing research at Lawrence Berkeley Labs and published in JAMA, and then Berkeley filed a patent on my research. And that's when I started learning, a mentor of mine from Cooley Godward, the Office of Science and Technology gave me a mentor to teach me how to start a company around the research I was doing. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't go to grad school or medical school and PhD and I just, start a company now. So I started WebOS, which is the first web operating system. My mom was my first, we didn't have a lot, but she put it on her credit card. My dad hated that. He hated credit card debt. And so she bought me my little Windows CE laptop, LG device. And then I was working a night job as a security guard. And I still have my security outfit. And I was a young dad. I married my college sweetheart at the time. And we had my son, Cyrus, who's now 28. And then my daughter, Daria, a few years later. But yeah, I started the company. I was 23, 24, 3 months in as a dad.
Working a night job.
Working a night job, no money. The fact that I thought I could start a company when I'm like working as a security guard at night to put money on the, food on the table.
And still like a nobody.
It's kind of amazing. Yeah, I didn't know anyone and no one knew me and no one opened doors for me. I had to knock doors down. But I was so like intellectually curious. I would read all the time. Like I devoured all of Montgomery County's library, in Rockville. I convinced my bus driver to take me to that library instead of home. So I would go there, do my homework, then read books. That was my internet back then. And so I read everything about Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, Bill Gates. I was so interested in entrepreneurship and science and technology. And then it helped architect my mental model and framework that I could start a company, that it wasn't based on who I know or what I have or being, coming from wealth or anything like that. It was like, no, I can start a company. It's possible. It kind of helped shape a lot of the mantras that I have that I talk about. I think when Travis introduced me to you when you were 24, and he was like, hey, will you he literally said it. He asked me to mentor you. Now you're 38?
38. Yeah. 14 years later.
You're getting old, buddy.
Yeah, I know. But dude, it changed my life. I mean, my relationship with you has had a dramatic impact on my life. And then the relationship with Emil and Travis, I mean, it's incredible.
You had that spark and that drive back then. And it's the same thing, I think, when I was your age, 23, 24, and I thought I could start something. People see that. And especially in America, the culture of like meritocracy, like if you have that spark, that drive, that willingness to work hard, that humility to be like, I want to learn, teach me, how did you do it? What can I do better? You were always like that. Even back then when you were 24, you were super curious. You asked really good questions, so it makes sense that you have a weekly podcast.
Hopefully the good questions will continue for this hour.
No, but it was great. And so all of us really enjoyed working with you. And I think that's why Travis saw that your potential and asked me to mentor you. And it was a joy. Like, it's been amazing to watch you rise and grow and succeed. And it's just the beginning for you.
I appreciate it.
Amazing stories from back then, huh?
Oh, the best. All right. So you become a venture capitalist. If you can succinctly maybe define what is venture capital? And when you got into it, what did you want to do? Because you clearly differentiated yourself in a stodgy industry where, at the time, again, early 2010s, people weren't blogging yet in this way that they are now and have Twitter presences and all this. I mean, but you found a way to really stand out in a field that wasn't necessarily differentiated in that way. I mean, so what is venture capital, and when you set out, what were you trying to do?
So let me start out with a little history lesson, because most people don't understand where venture capital even came from. I studied venture capital. I studied Silicon Valley. I studied how did this little place basically give birth to trillions of dollars of companies of value and have the impact. Our world is shaped by what was invented and created in Silicon Valley, in this little valley in California.
And it continues even post-COVID, and SF's dead. It's back. It's the revolution.
It had a little bit of trouble, but that was nothing. I never thought it was going to go away. It was San Francisco itself, where I lived, was having issues. But the deeper thing about Silicon Valley is, and I said this years ago, is that Silicon Valley has gone viral and it's spread around the world. And Silicon Valley is not a physical place anymore. It's an idea, and it's gone viral. So now Silicon Valley lives around the world. The ethos, the idea that you could start companies and lead for innovation and change the world. So if you peel back the layers, you get back all the way to the source, which is a guy named Arthur Rock, who in the 50s and 60s became friends with the guys who basically started the semiconductor industry. And there was a company called Fairchild Semiconductors. And this gang of 8 basically decided, play sucks, we're going to start our own company. And that was Intel. So they go to Arthur Rock, who was friends with these guys. And the term venture capital didn't exist. The term sheet that most people use and the ideas of option pools where you would give equity to the employees did not exist. These guys went over a weekend and brainstormed the idea of they were how do we incentivize the early teams so that they're also owners? So where it's not just the founders who become rich, but the employees become rich and succeed. Our success is their success, a win-win. And so these guys literally invented this framework, and he wrote the first term sheet with the option pool in it, right? Which was now standard. Every term sheet is okay, you got to create your 20% option pool or 10% option pool. If 5% is too low, you need enough to be able to spread the wealth.
Incentivize people and have them bought into the company.
Yeah. And it creates this engine that's based on meritocracy and hard work, that people who join and take the risk of joining a company when it's early, like you did at Uber, like I did as a venture capitalist, and joined company as an advisor and as a board member and so on, it rewards those who take the most risk, right? And it creates a structure where employees can come into the option pool and investors can come into the cap table by buying a piece of the company and giving it the capital to start. And so Intel and Arthur Rock basically invented this gangster shit. And this is the thanks to
the founding fathers. I mean,
they're the founding,
and incredible as 1776 and those young men coming up with the system of government that we still have 250 years later.
Yeah. I knew this story, but it viscerally got passed on to me because I met this guy years ago, Robert Friedland. This guy's a legend. He's 74 years old. He discovered Steve Jobs, when he was 14. And he saw the talent and he started mentoring him. He was a little bit older and he was at Reed College. So Steve Jobs goes to Reed College because of Robert Friedland. And Robert Friedland owned an apple orchard. And Steve Jobs worked for him at the apple orchard. And then Robert Friedland had been going to India since the 60s, 60s and 70s. And he experimented with psychedelics, introduced that to Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs went on that famous trip to India, tried psychedelics, and came back completely transformed and with the idea of starting Apple in the 1970s, right? 1976, 1977.
A wrinkle in time. And,
yeah.
And you end up with Apple.
And so they're at his garage. Okay. It is like parents' home. Robert Friedland's in the house, Wozniak and Steve Jobs. And somebody knocks on the door out of the blue. And Robert Friedland opens the door, and it's Arthur Rock and Dick Cramlin, who just passed away, and this other guy, I think Philip Serafin's father, who's an Egyptian billionaire now. And these guys are like, we're looking for Steve Jobs. We heard that we want to invest in their company. And he's like, oh, yeah, Steve's right here. So Robert goes and gets Steve, and he comes to the door. And he's like, dude, we don't have a company. We haven't started. They went to Homebrew and showed the first Apple in the wooden box that Wozniak had created with Steve. And they was like, that's fine. And check that answer from Arthur Rock. He didn't care that there wasn't a company. That is the ethos of Silicon Valley. He's like, oh, that's not a problem. We'll help you incorporate the company.
Exactly.
Here's a check. Those guys who wrote checks in Apple when Apple wasn't even a company, guess what? Dick didn't sell a share. So I'd seen Dick around, and he was business partners with a friend of mine. And later in life, he started NEA. He worked for Arthur Rock, so he learned how to do venture capital. Then he started NEA, but he wrote a check in basically the pre-seed round of Apple. Never sold a share. Do you know what that's worth now? Like, he's obviously given it to charity and passed it on to his family and everything. It's probably like $50 billion from that one tiny little investment.
From a knock on a garage.
From a knock on the garage and wanting to help somebody, incentivize somebody and fund their idea and their passion. But there's so many lessons in that as you peel it back. There's Robert finding Steve and identifying his talent. And I think for me as a venture capitalist, where I done well, I have had a knack for eyeing talent super early. Meeting you in the same way that Travis saw your potential. Like if you started a company, I would back you no matter what.
And you did. You invested in Bandit, yeah.
Yeah, I did. You're right. I forgot. That's how we have some more shares of GoPuff. But, when I was 23, I started WebOS. And my first hire was a guy named Zeki Mokhtarzada, who's the brother of a friend of mine I was in the magnet school with, Humaira Mokhtarzada. And they're like Afghan refugees. And he had like 3 other brothers, and they're all super smart and talented. So Zeki, I sent an email to like my alumni, and I was like, hey, I'm starting a company. If you know any engineers, let me know. And she responded saying, you need to meet my brother Zeki. He's 18. He's University of Maryland. So I'm in my first office for WebOS. He's my first interview, and is in Baltimore, Maryland, above an Irish pub. It was all I could afford. And every night there was music blazing out of the pub. And he drives this Datsun. The windows don't work. It's summertime. It's hot. And he's like driving with his head out the window, which I loved. Like, when he told me the story of how he got there. And I hired him on the spot. He ends up starting a company called Webs.com, which becomes Vistaprint. And I gave him the server to start the company 2 years after I hired him. And then I became founding president and chief operating officer and helped, open their first office. He was at NIH doing research while he had started this. And his brother, Haroon, who became the CEO, was at Harvard Law. It was similar to the Apple story. They didn't really have a company. They didn't have an office. There were like 3 people, and they had an idea. And when I joined, I opened up their office. And then Haroon finished Harvard, joined. Zeki left NIH, joined. And we raised our first venture capital. We ended up selling that to Vistaprint for a bunch. And then that gave me my first liquidity. So I had, no money. And I finally made some. And I remember I was in Washington, D.C. and the deal closed and the wire hit. And I called my dad. And I remember the sidewalk I was walking on. And I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I think I finally understand what you money is. I quit my job soon after that to start my own firm. That was one. And then my second hire was Anthony Casalena, who was 15 years old at the time. And I was trying to hire his dad, and his dad was a top, sales executive. And he was like, you need to meet my son. He's an amazing engineer. And I was like, sure. And they lived in Baltimore. So I go on a walk and talk with Anthony. He's 15. And I'm like, this guy's a genius. And I have to hire him. So I hire him. He's my second engineer after Zeki. He ends up starting Squarespace. And I give him the server to start Squarespace. He becomes a billionaire. We're best friends now. Now he's 40. So that was a signal for me that I had some kind of radar. I could detect talent and I could believe in them super early. And those are all the ingredients for true early stage venture capitalists. It's not in the spreadsheet. Anyone that tells you that they're investing at the pre-seed round, when those guys invested in Steve Jobs, you think they had a spreadsheet in front of them?
The model that was ready to go.
Before the company was incorporated.
Yeah. 40 years later, you'll invent the iPad.
To me, that's later stage. Maybe Series C and up, Series B and up. But pre-seed, seed, and even A is something else. It's obviously being aware of the business model, the metrics and the market, the product. There is something that's hard to define, which is you have to have that gut. And it's very hard to teach that. No matter how many people are like, come pay for my seminar. I'm going to teach you how to become a great early stage investor. It's bull. You either have the radar or you don't. It's very clear that this is true because when you look at any kind of, especially early stage in venture capital, it's always one partner or maximum two that are driving almost all the returns. There's one or two that have it, and everyone else is riding their coattails. That's why I've built now an index of 32 early stage, pre-seed, seed firms that I've invested in, because I look for those people that have that instinct.
That magic.
Yeah.
What did you see in Travis Kalanick when you met him?
First of all, I chased Travis for a year. He was very hard to get him.
He's elusive.
Very elusive.
I've been trying to chase him to tell him about the pod. He keeps leaving me on red. So I see it. I feel like he wants to do that just to mess with me further. Where it's read the message.
You just have to show up. You just go to his house. You know where he lives.
Get on the plane.
That's my other mantra. I'll tell that. Yeah, it's a get on the plane mantra. But yeah, get on the plane, take your podcast stuff with you, and just set up at his house. He'll respect that hustle. You just got to hack into it. You know this.
I wanted to get better first.
Yeah, you're practicing.
I'm getting. But people are like, "Who's your white whale?" I'm like, "Who's my white whale?" Obviously, it's Travis.
Okay, so I call founders like Travis. These are foundational founders. It's like Elon Musk, Travis Kalanick, obviously Steve Jobs, Brian Chesky,
1000x entrepreneurs.
Yeah, there are 1000x entrepreneurs, and when you meet them, you can sense the difference. There is a fierce intellect. They're extremely intelligent. They're the closest to super intelligence as a human that you can get. So I look for that. I look for kind of brilliance and intelligence. And then the other thing I look for is a chip on their shoulders. Travis has a chip on his shoulder. Elon has it. Brian has it. And, if you don't have it, it's very difficult to create the kind of companies that end up becoming multi-trillion-dollar companies. Steve Jobs had it. Even Bill Gates had it, even though he was from a successful family. He instilled a chip on his shoulder. And you got to have that drive, that energy, that fierceness, that courage. And so we look for that. And so Travis was very hard to get to. And I was trying every which way. And finally, one way that I finally got his attention was Evelyn Rusli, who used to be at New York Times as a reporter. I was friends with her and still am. And she's amazing and a great reporter and now a great entrepreneur. And so she was doing a story on unicorns, essentially. And I had a quote in there saying at the time, there weren't that many multi-billion-dollar companies, startups. I was like, there's going to be 50 plus, unicorns out there. And people thought I was crazy.
That was a crazy statement though.
Yeah. And it was, people thought, well, what? Now there's like thousands of them. But this was like 2011. And I was right. But then she wanted to talk to Travis. So I connected the dots and was like, hey, you can be in the story. And he ended up being in the story. So I know that got his attention. Still didn't respond, didn't give me a meeting. And then I decided, okay, I'm gonna swarm him with people that he respects, saying, hey, you should talk to Shervin. So I had Sheryl Sandberg, Drew Houston, Julius Januszowski, and Travis, many more. And Travis, said this, publicly, and to me, he was like, I had to talk to Shervin because I didn't have a choice. He was just going to keep doing this, and these were, obviously impressive people. And it meant something that they were taking the time to say to him, hey, you should actually meet this guy. And then I was friends with Matt Kohler. I knew him early days of Facebook. And I told Matt, hey, he was a benchmark at the time. And he had led essentially the round, even though he didn't take the board seat at the time, of the Series A of Uber. And so I was like, look, whenever he decides to raise his next round, please let me know. At this point, I was in Menlo as a rookie venture capitalist, rookie season. And it was my first 90 days as a VC.
Like Ichiro Suzuki. It's a little bit of a dated reference, but he was a very good rookie.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, look, if they just, please let me know. So, he did me a solid. And the day of the board meeting, he was a board observer, he called me. He was like, hey, Travis decided to raise his next round. Can you go meet him the next day? And so I was the first person in his office on Market Street. So it's a little oval and the circular table. So I walked in there. There was a shoe hanging from the ceiling. You remember that shoe? It was a sneaker. I was like, what the hell is a sneaker doing up here? And then we met for 2 hours.
And this is probably
2.5 hours.
August or September?
Yeah, August of 2011.
Yeah, so this is right when I started.
The company was this is right when you started. And you were in Chicago, right?
Yeah, but I came
what
out.
What employee number were you?
25.
25.
But there was probably about 15 people at the company at that time.
Yeah. So there was 15 people in the company. I think there were a couple thousand cars on the network. Maybe. 1.8 million in revenue. And so I walk in there. We have one of those mind melds, and we hit it off. I tell him my story. He tells me his. And I knew right there, I was like, I have to invest in this company. I will, I will fight for this. And I did. I fought. And so then he calls me and he's like, hey, homie. I was like, hey, call me homie. And he was like, I really wanted to do this with you, but I got to go with this other firm. And I didn't know at the time it was Andreessen Horowitz. And, I've been through this before as an entrepreneur, and I respected his decision. I was like, look, I totally understand, but know that I'm 100,000% behind you. If anything happens in diligence, you have a strong backup. So negotiate with strength. I'm glad I said that, because 2 weeks later, he called me and he was like, hey, homie. I was like, hey, and I was in Africa giving a speech for Obama's entrepreneurship summit and in Algeria. And luckily my freaking phone worked. It said unknown number, and I usually don't answer those. And I remember where I was in the hallway. There was a maid in the hallway, and I was like, getting this call. I was like, answer the phone. And he's like, hey, homie, remember what you told me 2 weeks ago? Is that true? Is that still true? And I was like, absolutely, it's true. He's like, can you meet me in Dublin, Ireland tomorrow? And this is where my mantra, get on the plane, comes from. And I was like, absolutely. I didn't even know. I was like, yes. I'm going to change my schedule, get on a plane. I got on the plane, flew to Dublin, met him in the streets of Dublin, cobblestone streets, went for a walk and talk, had a pint of Guinness. And it was on that walk that he told me his true vision for Uber, which was to replace car ownership. And most of my competitors in that round, they were trying to value the company based on taxi companies and black car or livery companies. And that was the wrong analysis. So I did my analysis based on basically, something else, which, ended up becoming the ride sharing world and, those ideas. And that ultimately we would come to a world where you'd have ride sharing, you'd have asset light models, and that behavior. And the way I invest is I look for behavioral change. I go around the world, like when historic things are happening, like in Iran right now, or what was happening in the Arab Spring. I actually like physically go to this place. I went to Tahrir Square during the revolution in Egypt. I went to Libya, to Benghazi and Tripoli during the revolution, and 2 weeks before Gaddafi was killed. And like, I want to see history happening. And so I'm a student of human behavioral change. And that comes from, I think, my upbringing, but also like I studied anthropology at Berkeley too. And it taught me a lot about human behavioral change. And when that happens is when human behavioral change happens, suddenly you have these new behaviors, like ordering an Uber on an iPhone and pushing a button and getting a car in 2, 3, 4 minutes didn't exist before. It was a completely new behavior that only we saw in this company of 15 people. And I was like, this is going to take over the world. This is going to become a daily activity. And then when I found out some of the early metrics, it was like, when I look at human behavioral change, it's like, what's the frequency of that new behavior? And at the time, if you remember, it was 3.5 times a month, right? And then I was like, okay, so what's the spend per time that they use it? It was $45 because it was all black car. It wasn't Uber X. So I was like, wait a second, people are spending more money on Uber than they are on cable. So that was significant. And then I did the math of just in my head of like, okay, well, they're in this many cities, this many cars. Let's say we get to 100 cities. What are the numbers? And the number I came up with for the first year was 100 million from 1.8. And I was wrong, but I was wrong in the right way because Uber hit that number in 6 months. So when I valued the company, I valued it at 290 million, and everyone thought I was crazy. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm crazy. And so what happened in Dublin was, the reason he called me is venture capitalists sometimes outsmart themselves and they try to optimize for things like valuation. And so the investors that had won the deal tried to renegotiate with Travis. And as you know, Travis, like, it's a huge mistake. You don't renegotiate with Travis Kalanick. Like you once you give your word, you keep your word. Elon's like that. Many of the best founders, Steve Jobs is like that. They're very principled.
And they don't have time. They don't have time for bullshit.
And you do that once, they know that you're going to screw them in the future. So that's why he gave me the opportunity to come in. And I was like, okay, like I want to do this right there and then. As we were on the cobblestone streets, he was like, all right, give me a term sheet. And I texted him the valuation, and I was like 290 million. And we were texting back and forth. And I went back to my hotel room to type up the term sheet. And then he stopped typing. It was like, the dots coming up, and it looks like ET. It was like, and I was like, what's going on? And I started getting worried after like an hour.
I can't lose this again.
I can't lose this. And I was like, is he negotiating with somebody else? Because maybe he's shopping this. And I was like, 300.
And I'll clean your house. And
for the first and last time, Travis didn't negotiate, like optimize it at all. And he was like, no, 290 is fine, which was so solid of him. And so I ran to his hotel room, and you've got that picture, and signed the term sheet. I didn't even ask permission. I just did it. And it was
so good.
Yeah. So,
did you get any from your firm for signing that without?
No, they were solid. I knew they were believers at that point. Initially when I was trying to win the deal initially, I remember they wanted to, instead of a $20 million check, they were like, can we do $5 million? And I was like, and part of why Andreessen, I think, one is like I had to say it because it's my firm, and I'm a rookie, first time VC. So I did say to Travis, like, they want to do 5 million instead of 20. And he's like, peace, I'm out. So that's why I went to Andreessen. And Andreessen's valuation was like 320 or something.
And then they dropped down.
And then they tried to drop it to like 220 or something. And so I came in at 290. And by that point, a number of the partners at Menlo, especially this one guy, Doug Carlisle, had used the product. And Doug became a mentor of mine. He's one of those old school VCs. He taught me a lot. And I'm really glad I went with Menlo because I had an offer from Kleiner Perkins. And I went with Menlo. There was a guy named Sean Corlin who was a younger VC. He was the only consumer guy. They were all enterprise. And so he was trying to recruit me because this trend of entrepreneurs becoming VCs was starting to happen. Like Reid Hoffman joined Greylock. And so it was in the early days of that happening. Because before it was not the case. It was a lot of MBAs and consultants and so on, finance people. And so founder first people, that was the beginning of that trend. And so I came in to help build the consumer practice. I started the Menlo Talent Fund, which was, doing, pre-seed and seed investments. Yeah. So he came in and they hosted me one of the partners' houses. And all of them were from, modest backgrounds. Like the founder of Menlo, DeBose Montgomery, was from South Carolina, first in his family to go to college. Similar to me, read all the books, sci-fi books in the library, read about MIT and all the books, and was like, I want to go to MIT. And his college advisor was like, you can't get into MIT. And he was like, yes, I can. And he was like telling him to go to, University of South Carolina instead. So he applies to MIT and gets in, goes there, and he starts one of the first VCs, which is Menlo. So I love that kind of ethos and that they were from basically nothing. And then Doug kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot. He was one of the things he taught me. He was like, you have no friends in the venture capital business. And I was so idealistic at the time. I was like, no, we're like,
everybody's my
friends. And then everything happened at Uber. It was, other VCs that had their knives out for Travis and ultimately for me for protecting Travis. And he was right. Like there's some really awful behaviors in our industry, especially against founders. Whether it's Steve Jobs getting fired or Jack Dorsey getting fired or Travis getting fired or people trying to get rid of Elon in the early days. And
even today.
It's like idiotic actions of like, if you look at founder-led companies, they out-index everything. So like trying to get rid of founders is a really, really bad idea. And, we'll get into the Uber story, but like, Uber would have been $1 trillion company by now if Travis and Emil had stayed in. And Dara is an amazing leader. And, he took what was there in a crisis and he's, got it back to close to $200 billion enterprise, which is amazing. But like still, Travis was early on the self-driving, as you remember,
crazy,
right? Like he was way ahead. He was way ahead in AI. He saw that AI paper, the inference paper, super early. He was talking about this in Saudi. They were asking him like, what would you have done? He was like, well, you were super early on self-driving. And he had that vision from the beginning. Even in the cobblestone streets of Ireland, like he talked about that.
And he would have had the fortitude and I think the aggressiveness to actually make a change like that. Like we'll see what happens. But like the fact that Google is going to be the ones that actually transform the world with self-driving. I mean, obviously Tesla, but you can see an Elon's going to have way bigger whatever to be able to actually make that risk and push that forward. Travis was willing to do that. I mean,
he was super. I mean, you saw what he did at Carnegie Mellon and super early, and he had that vision. So it was what could have been, but we've all done well. I'm grateful, all that stuff. But the lesson is like, don't get rid of your founders. Like, the great founders, you support them, you find ways to help them. This was, guys like Bill Gurley and Chris Sacca and others who had it out for Travis and they went after him.
Going back maybe to some of the early days of Uber, I've got a couple pictures to show you. Maybe jog your memory. So we've got, and this was some of the archives too from people. So Le Web. So you shaved your head.
This is at the launch of
London,
Paris, and announcing my round.
Yes.
This is at Le Web.
Yeah. So this is you shaving your head. And if you remember,
this is 2012. Yeah. This is 2011 we launched Paris, and then 2012 we went back.
Yeah, so this is you getting your head shaved.
Logo in.
This is free taxi week. with Kenny Tsai.
Oh my
You stole his
God.
hat. He was actually wondering where that hat is.
Earliest hats.
This is Sam Gelman.
When I think of Shervin, I think about launching in London and Amsterdam. And anytime I'd go to a new city, the first thing I had to do was call Shervin. And he would introduce me to like 3 to 5 people. And they would always be like billionaires or people with absolutely insane credentials or who had founded diamond companies. Like every single time it was someone at like the top like tier of accomplishment in the city. And every time, didn't matter who it was, they would take my call and be like, if you're Shervin's friend, of course I'm going to meet with you. So that was pretty cool that like I was a 30-year-old random launcher and getting like these crazy interests. It was like my advice to every launcher was first thing you got to do, call Shervin.
Oh, that's awesome.
One of the Entourage tweets that like obviously you had something to do with in the early days. DNC.
Oh yeah.
2012. You and me, MC Hammer, Keith.
Yeah.
Radford. You and Travis Ribbon calls Will I Am.
Oh my God.
If you remember, we met Will I Am in like the lobby of a hotel.
And this is Travis and I are crisis managing right there on the phone. Did you take that picture?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was when we were at the Republican National Convention.
Democrat.
Well, we're both.
Yeah. Tim's Tampa, I think, was the Republican. We were in Charlotte at the Democrat.
So then what happened was we were launching Uber Taxi in New York. And we had launched it. It was like the first week. And then the taxi commissioner called, and I was in the hotel room with Travis working. And the commissioner was like, canceling the launch. And Travis like just ripped into him. And it was one of those moments when I was like, this is why Travis this is why Uber is going to be such a massive company. He had no fear. Like most people, when the taxi commissioner in New York is calling, would be like, yes, sir. Like, oh, yes, acquiescing and trying to, finesse them their way out of it. No, Travis was pissed off, was upset, was like, you gave me, I remember he was like the moral indignation of like, you gave me your word. You said we could launch this. We launched it. We did that. We worked, you can't do like, it was so courageous, and it just made me a bigger believer in everything. But we're both on the phone calling, multiple different people. So I built the regulatory practice at Uber and Airbnb and PillPack, and I had this whole thesis called regulatory arbitrage. And so that idea was that in companies like this, especially in the ride sharing and Airbnb, Uber type companies, the sharing economy and so on, when the service and technology is so far ahead of the current regulatory framework, you have this arbitrage opportunity where you can create a lot of value, but you need to have the best and the brightest in the regulatory policy world. Yeah, so we brought in the best and the brightest on the regulatory world. I remember that meeting with Travis where I introduced Jim Messina, who is Obama's, right-hand person. And I said, you got to meet this guy. Like, he can help us build, our regulatory practice and fight all these like corrupt, cities and mayors and county councils and city councils and so on. And we basically, came up with the whole playbook. And in that meeting, as Messina was talking, explaining, how he would go about it, Travis goes, I get it. Like, we got to run it like a campaign, because that's what Messina was saying. You have to run it like a political campaign. And we had come up with some early campaign ideas. Like, remember in the Washington launch in December of 2011, Rachel was the city launcher. We knew which people had opened up the Uber app in the city before it was launched, so we could actually message them. And so we messaged all these people because the city council tried to ban Uber. They passed the Uber law, and the DC city council was super corrupt. The mayor, the city council, and so on. The taxi industry totally owned it, and so owned them. And so basically, they tried to block it. So what we did is I remember like we were typing this, and I wrote a blog post, and we messaged all of the people in Washington who had downloaded the app. We said, your city council is doing this. Here's their numbers, emails, blah, blah. And they like overnight abandoned the bill because they got bombarded by citizens saying, what are you doing? Like, we want this. And that became part of the playbook. It was the warfare of what we were coming up with. And it was like a campaign. And I remember in that meeting, that's when the aha moment happened. And Travis was like, I get it. Like we have to run this like a political campaign, and Uber is the candidate. Right. So you're selling and that led to like when the mayor of New York tried to block Uber and
de Blasio mode.
Yeah. De Blasio. And
you pressed that button and you couldn't get a car.
Yeah, exactly. And is that what it was called?
Yeah.
The Blasio mode. That's exactly right. We did that. And then we did a commercial, blasting it as a, so that was a campaign, strategy, and it worked. And we did that 800 cities around the world. As Galman talked about, it's like every city we launched. I went to more city launches than I think any other. I don't remember any other investor. Like I was literally like, I felt, and it really kind of I had Shervin at Uber.com email. Travis made me an advisor. I was on the boards. I felt like I was one of the team, and really the team treated me that way. And that's why it was so special. And that created kind of the playbook for how I invest anyways. Like when I invest, the idea of a venture capitalist like checking in at a board meeting is so boring and like intellectually not challenging at all. But like rolling up your sleeves and, traveling around the world with the founder, opening up markets, bringing in new investors,
bringing the right strategic investors, like celebrities, other people, all these people that you open the door.
That whole playbook. I came up with that playbook in the Uber round. Like I brought in like Guy Oseary jokes that more people in Hollywood made money. People in the music industry made more money in Uber than they did in the music industry.
Making music.
I brought like, Scooter Braun and Guy Oseary and Ashton Kutcher and Jay-Z and Jay Brown and Will Smith and all of them as in that round of Uber. I also brought Bezos and Eric Schmidt and Yuri Milner. One of my mentees, Patrick Finnegan, who I'm an investor in his fund. And he got me a nice distribution on Poppy recently. So I'm very proud of him. It's his fund, Intuitive Truth, did the seed round. But Patrick called it the Shervin round. Like, he learned to do that from that playbook. And it made a material difference in these companies. And what we realized is like when you get somebody like Jay-Z talking about Uber, they don't need to publicly talking about it. They could be at a dinner with influential people in the early days when no one knew what Uber was and be like, hey, I've just invested in this thing. And that like, it spreads like wildfire. When you have those nodes kind of resonating and vibrating about a company or about an idea, it makes a massive, massive difference. So, going around the world and then copying that playbook, and like if we were going to launch in New Delhi and India, we would do the same thing. Like when we launched LA, I had brought Edward Norton into Uber. So I remember I was having dinner with him the day before LA launch. You remember when we went
and he had a surfboard.
William Barnes, and he was like, I'm going surfing tomorrow. And it was like, hey, if you're going surfing in Malibu, why don't you order an Uber SUV and put the surfboard in there, and we'll make you rider one. And rider zero was Travis's parents, and his amazing mom, God bless her soul, his amazing dad, who's a G. They were rider zero, which was really nice of Travis, meaningful. And then rider one was Edward Norton going surfing. And we put that in the blog post. Then we replicated that all over the world, So,
Tony Hawk in San Diego and all this kind of stuff.
That's where it started.
Yeah. So if we go back to South by 2013, first thing that you did, if you remember, is that we actually had Teslas on the road. Yeah. You could request a Tesla, which in 2013, that was awesome to be able to request a Tesla in your Uber app.
The Tesla was so new. Yeah.
It was so new. You didn't see them, like they weren't nearly as prevalent as they are now. And so you helped set that deal up.
Yeah. I reached out to Elon as I was supposed to, and I said, hey, why don't we have you and Travis and me, like have you order the first Tesla and Uber. So that's where that picture's from that you have
Yes.
of Elon.
It'll be here
first,
right now.
Yeah.
We'll superimpose it.
Ordering the first Uber. And it was an epic, iconic moment. And that's where their friendship also, started.
So we set it up. I'll never forget. So we go to the first hotel.
Yeah.
And it's you, me, and Travis. We also had CNN come to film it. So it was live on CNN.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So we walk up to the hotel and one of his security guards comes out and he said, Elon left. He changed hotels. And I remember you grabbing me and you said, don't this up. Half kidding, half true.
Yeah.
Half messing with me,
Yeah.
half actually don't mess this up.
Right.
Travis is antsy already. He's like, why am I doing this? Why are you guys making me do this? Whatever. So we go to the new hotel,
Yeah.
the second hotel,
Right.
where he tells us Elon is. And again, it's you, me, Travis, who's antsy,
Yeah.
and CNN moving to a second hotel.
Right. It's a second location.
We
Right.
get there and his real security guard, I think he's still a security guard, I've asked people, comes out and he's like, Elon's in like demon mode or whatever it's called, where he's like heads down working. He can't be disturbed right now. And I'm like, can't be disturbed? Like, what are you talking about? Like, we're supposed to do this thing. And then he's going and keynoting. You guys were taking the ride for him to keynote South by Southwest.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it's like, hey, like we gotta, NCNN is here. Like we gotta like move and groove. So whatever. Now Travis is like really antsy. Travis always wanted it to be real. He didn't want to just do the show. He was like,
order.
actually get him to download
Not
the app.
fake. Yeah.
Not fake.
There's no artifice with Travis. Yeah.
So I go to Elon, do you have the Uber app? He looked at me like I had three heads.
Yeah, you made him download the app.
And I'm like, I'm gonna have to put my credit card in Elon's Uber,
Yeah.
which I'll get charged for Ubers forever.
He's probably still using it. Yeah.
So anyways, he orders.
Yeah.
We get them in the car together. You and I were in a Tesla behind them.
Yeah.
So because you were like, hey, let's give them a moment.
Yeah, give them a moment.
Because you knew the serendipity.
Yeah, exactly.
We're riding behind. We get to the entrance. They won't let them in because they don't know who this random car is. You're like, make this happen. I jump out in traffic. I run up to the security guard. I'm like, that's Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick. Like, you got to let them in. They pull in. We pull behind. We all jump out. I have an epic picture that we'll show again of the three of you guys standing there. We're in the back. And then Elon jumps out and gives the keynote where he shows the rocket landing itself. It was the Johnny Cash Ring of Fire.
Yeah, the Ring of Fire. He loves Johnny Cash.
And the rocket lands itself. And you grabbed me and you were like, hell
Great
yeah.
job. Yeah, you pulled it off. I was very proud of you.
So then you're like, come to my dinner tonight.
Oh, yeah, that dinner. Wow.
So I go to this dinner.
Yeah.
I'm like riding high. I'm like, my ego is as big as it's ever been in my life, right? I'm like, I've made it. At whatever stupid age I was. Scooter Braun's there. Ashton Kutcher's there.
Yeah.
I meet Emil for the first time, which is hilarious. Yeah. And Kara Swisher comes over to me. And I do everything wrong that is possible in the conversation. And I say, who are you? She didn't like that.
Yeah, you don't say that to Kara.
She says who she is.
Yeah.
I said, oh, well, you should interview Travis. It'll be the best interview you've ever done. And she says, better than Steve Jobs? And I said,
she's interviewed all the legends.
All the legends. And she says, but in this moment, I think, and I still think Travis is the GOAT and the best and whatever else. There's a bunch of learnings in here, to be clear. And then I said, well, it'll be the second best interview you've ever done. So a couple days later, you grab me and you say, hey, I want you to come take me to the airport. Like, jump in the car with me. I'm going to go to the airport. Ride with me. We're riding out to the airport. Ironically enough, your flight gets delayed. And you're like, find the most decent place for barbecue that we can go.
Yeah,
we end up like on the side of the road eating barbecue, some hole in the wall.
Yeah.
And you sit me down. You had gotten the message from Kara Swisher about the interaction with me.
Right.
And it was the most profound advice I've gotten in my life. And you sit me down and you're like, look, I'm trying to turn this into a public company. I actually have my eyes on what the future state of this company needs to be, and the reputation and the brand we're trying to build and the relationships that we're trying to curate around this thing. And I'm trying to help you be a man and be successful and whatever else. And like, this could not have been, you handled this about as poorly as you could have handled a situation. And like, look, again, in the big scheme of things, whatever else, but it was just upfront. And the fact that you sat me down and had that moment with me. And from there, I mean, obviously you still make mistakes and whatever else, but I knew the buttoned up nature and how serious the thing we were trying to build was. That was the moment for me where it really settled. And hopefully in a lot of ways, there's a reason we're sitting here and changed a lot of things for me. So I will dedicate this to Kara Swisher, that moment. But so I don't know how much of that you remember, but
I remember all of it. That was some good barbecue too.
Some good barbecue.
I think, look, I mean, these are teachable moments. Like those types of teachable moments come in life, and they're very precious. And so a lot of times teachable moments happen. And if you're self-aware enough, you can kind of, register it and learn from it yourself. But most people, miss the teachable moments, and it kind of goes through them. And that's why it's so important to have mentors who care about you. Like, take the time to go get some barbecue and have that tough conversation. I'm never afraid to tell it like it is, because like I was raised by parents who were really high integrity people, and they always kept it real with me, and they always, kept me to a higher standard. I was laughing because last week we did an early Father's Day dinner at a kebab, and I invited one of my dear friends, Alex Mayer, who's a genius, like PhD, Iranian American engineer who started Zeus and sold it for $300 million. And he's got this AI company that's amazing that I'm getting involved in. And so he flew in for the day to meet me. And we had a beautiful day brainstorming and all this stuff. And I was giving him advice. And I was like, do you want to join us, family dinner? So he joined. And then, so it's me, and now I'm a YG, young grandpa. Sarah's had a little baby girl. Aurora is the light of my life, and so she's there, my sister, my brother, like the whole family. And basically, Alex gets to witness what my life is like, because Alex basically has like a PhD. He has all the things that my Persian dad, who loves like PhD, he has a PhD. His daughter has a PhD. His son has other son has a law degree. I was supposed to be the MD PhD. So like, no matter what I've done in my life, I've still disappointed my father. And he thinks I'm like, a disappointment, less than. And I was like, Dad, you have a new, favorite son, Alex Mayer. His PhD is all the things that you wanted. And it's like, I endowed a professorship, and he's still like, he was so viscerally disappointed. He's like, my son did not get his PhD. It's like, you did. I'm very proud of you. So he's like celebrating Alex, and then like being like, looking at me like, on
Father's Day.
Yeah. So like the reason I have these tough conversations is because, my parents did that to me all the time. If I made a mistake, they would tell me. I remember I got a bad grade, and my dad didn't yell or scream or anything. Like, he just looked at me, and I was in 7th grade, and he looked at me and he was like, I remember showing him, I was afraid to show him the grade. And then he saw it and he goes, I'm disappointed in you. And that hurt more than anything, like more than him yelling or screaming or anything like that. Just someone I respect so much being disappointed in me hurt and stung way more. And I never did it again. So if you have a bond like we have, and I tell you, you disappointed me with the Kara Swisher thing, you never did it again. You never made that mistake. And you've been super humble and like respectful to people all the time. And you just had that one moment when you were like high on life, and it's Elon and Travis and like, and you're like, yeah, like this is going to be the greatest interview of your life. She's like, better than Steve Jobs? And like, oh, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah. But teachable moments, you got to get the most you can from those. They're gifts.
I think also it says a lot about, all right, so we're up there. Would you be down to do this again? Because we're going to need part 2. We're
going to do part 2 and tell the whole
part 3, part 4.
Yeah.
Dude, you're the best. Thank you so much.